The night shift assignment Marcus Webb never expected his engineering degree to land him on a deep space mining station orbiting a gas giant in the Kepler system. The job posting had mentioned challenging work environment and unique cultural exchange opportunities, but failed to specify that his boss would be a 7-foot-tall Zephyrian with silver skin and eyes like liquid mercury. Vex Calandros was the CEO of Stellar Dynamics Corporation, and according to station gossip, she had never taken a vacation, never missed a shift, and never smiled. The other human workers called her the Ice Queen of Sector 7, though never within earshot of her pointed, tufted ears. Marcus had been working day shifts for 3 months when Vex summoned him to her office. The space was minimalist and cold, with holographic displays showing mining quotas and efficiency reports floating in the air like frozen butterflies. She stood behind her desk, her long white hair pulled back in a severe knot, wearing the standard-issue dark blue uniform that somehow looked more authoritative on her tall frame. "Engineer Webb," she said, her voice carrying that peculiar musical quality all Zephyrians possessed. "Your work on the plasma conduit repairs has been noted." Marcus shifted nervously. "Thank you, ma'am. Just doing my job." "Indeed. Which is why you are being reassigned to night shift maintenance, effective immediately." His heart sank. Night shifts meant isolation, skeleton crews, and the kind of silence that made you question your life choices. Did I do something wrong? For the first time since he'd known her, Vex hesitated. Her silver fingers drummed once against the desk's surface. "The night crew requires someone with your particular skill set. You work well under pressure and ask fewer questions than your colleagues." "That's because I'm usually too confused to know what to ask." Something flickered across her expression. Not quite amusement, but close. "Report to Maintenance Bay Delta at 2200 hours. I will personally oversee your transition to ensure optimal efficiency." That night, Marcus discovered that working alone with Vex was entirely different from their brief professional encounters. She moved through the maintenance tunnels with fluid grace, her long limbs never seeming awkward despite the cramped spaces designed for average-sized humanoids. She knew every system on the station intimately, could diagnose problems by sound alone, and had an uncanny ability to predict equipment failures days before they happened. "The atmospheric recycler in Section C will malfunction within 48 hours, she announced during their second week together, barely glancing at the diagnostic readings. "How can you tell?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "The harmonic frequency has shifted by 0.03%. Zephyrian hearing is more sensitive than human." "That's incredible. What else can you hear?" She paused in her calibrations. "Your heart rate increases when you drink too much caffeine. The ventilation system in your quarters needs adjustment. You talk to yourself when you think no one is listening." Marcus felt his cheeks burn. "You can hear me in my room?" "Station walls are thinner than they appear. I do not intentionally eavesdrop." "What do I talk about?" Another pause, longer this time. "Engineering problems. Your family on Earth. Sometimes you sing old human songs very badly." Despite his embarrassment, Marcus laughed. "My sister always said I sounded like a dying space whale. I have never heard a space whale die, but your comparison seems accurate." It was the closest thing to a joke he'd ever heard from her. Over the following nights, their conversations grew longer. Vex revealed that she had studied human culture extensively, found their music fascinating despite her criticism of his singing, and had been running Stellar Dynamics for 6 years without taking a single day off. "Don't you get tired?" Marcus asked one night while they recalibrated the gravity generators. "Zephyrians require less rest than humans. We enter a meditative state for approximately 2 hours every cycle. But don't you want to do something besides work, travel, have hobbies?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she said, "I find purpose in efficiency. This station processes materials that build homes, ships, infrastructure for dozens of species. The work matters." "Yeah, but what do you want, Vex? Not the station, not the company." You. The question seemed to catch her off guard. Her silver eyes met his, and for a moment, her composed mask slipped. I want, she began, then stopped. I should complete these diagnostics. But Marcus had seen something in that unguarded moment. Loneliness. The same feeling that had driven him to accept a job light years from home, hoping to find something he couldn't name among the stars. As they worked side by side in the humming, mechanical heart of the station, he began to realize that maybe Vex's excuses for keeping him after hours weren't entirely about work efficiency. Maybe, like him, she was just tired of being alone in the vast emptiness of space. The gravity of attraction. 3 weeks into their night routine, Marcus began to notice patterns in Vex's behavior that had nothing to do with station maintenance. She would discover critical system checks, just as their shift was supposed to, and find reasons to review diagnostics twice, and develop a sudden interest in explaining Zephyrian engineering philosophy during their meal breaks. The quantum resonance chambers require additional calibration, she announced one night, despite the fact that they had calibrated them perfectly just 2 days earlier. Marcus looked up from his repair manual. Didn't we just optimize those? Optimization is an ongoing process. Standards must be maintained. He was starting to recognize her tells. The way her ears twitched slightly when she was improvising, how her voice became just a fraction more formal when she was being less than truthful. Vex, are you making up reasons to keep me here? She froze in the middle of adjusting a perfectly functional control panel. For several seconds, the only sound was the station's eternal mechanical breathing. Then, without turning around, she said, "Would you prefer to return to your quarters?" The question hung in the recycled air between them. Marcus realized his answer mattered more than he'd expected. "No, actually, I like working with you." Her shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. "The work is more efficient with adequate assistance." Right, the work. He set down his tools and moved closer. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You may ask. I may not answer." "How long have you been alone out here?" This time she did turn around. Her mercury eyes searched his face as if looking for some hidden motive. "Define alone." "I mean, really alone. When was the last time you had a conversation that wasn't about plasma conduits or mining quotas?" "I have conversations with department heads regularly." "That's not what I meant. And you know it." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Vex moved to the observation port, staring out at the swirling storms of the gas giant below. "Zephyrians do not form attachments easily. We are raised to value logic over emotion, efficiency over sentiment." "That sounds lonely." "It is practical." Marcus joined her at the viewport. "Practical and lonely aren't mutually exclusive." "No," she said quietly. "They are not." They stood there watching the planet's eternal dance, two figures reflected in the transparent aluminum that separated them from the void. Marcus found himself studying her profile, the elegant line of her neck, the way starlight caught the silver tones in her skin. "Why did you really transfer me to night shift?" he asked. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You laugh at your own mistakes. Most people become angry or frustrated when things go wrong. You find humor in chaos. I find that unusual. Is unusual good or bad? I am still determining that." Over the following nights, their conversations ranged far beyond station maintenance. Vex told him about Zephyros, her home world, where the cities were built into crystalline mountains, and the sky was perpetually filled with aurora-like phenomena. She described her education, her rise through corporate ranks, and the pressure her family placed on her to succeed. Marcus shared stories about Earth, about growing up near the ocean, about his decision to leave everything familiar behind for a chance to see the galaxy. He told her about loneliness, about the peculiar human need for connection that seemed to override logic. "Humans are social creatures," he explained one night while they pretended to inspect perfectly functional air recyclers. "We're not built to be alone for long periods. It affects our mental health, our decision-making abilities. We need interaction, emotional connections." That seems inefficient. Maybe, but it's also what makes us strong. Humans will risk everything for people they care about. We build families, communities, alliances. We're better together than apart. Vex considered this. Zephyrians value independence. Self-sufficiency is considered the highest virtue. "What do you value, though?" "Not your species. You." She looked at him with those liquid silver eyes, and he saw something vulnerable beneath her composed exterior. "I value competence, order, predictability." "Anything else?" A pause. "I am beginning to value your company." It was the most personal thing she had ever said to him. Marcus felt his heart rate increase, and judging by the slight tilt of her head, she heard it too. "My company or my engineering skills?" "Both, though your engineering skills are merely adequate." He laughed, and she did something he had never seen before. She smiled. It was small, barely visible, but it transformed her entire face. For a moment, the Ice Queen of Sector 7 looked almost human. "There it is," he said softly. "What?" "The smile I was wondering if you had." Her expression immediately returned to neutral, but he caught the faint flush of silver across her cheekbones. "Smiling is not conducive to workplace efficiency." "Maybe not, but it's conducive to happiness. Happiness is a luxury I cannot afford." "Says who?" The question seemed to surprise her. She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked away. "The station requires constant supervision. The company depends on consistent leadership. I have responsibilities." "So do I. But I still make time for things that make me happy." "Such as?" "Talking. With you." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Vex stared at him with an expression he couldn't read, her silver skin shimmering in the artificial light. Finally, she said, "The thermal coupling in Section E requires inspection." Marcus smiled. "Of course it does." But as they headed toward another perfectly functional system that definitely didn't need their attention, he caught her looking at him when she thought he wasn't watching, and for the first time since he'd arrived at the station, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. System overload. The emergency klaxon shattered the quiet of their fourth week together, its urgent wail echoing through the maintenance corridors like a mechanical scream. Marcus dropped his plasma torch as red warning lights bathed everything in an ominous glow. "Hull breach in mining section Beta," Vex announced, already moving toward the emergency lockers with fluid efficiency. "Automated systems are offline. We have approximately 18 minutes before atmospheric pressure drops to critical levels." Marcus felt his stomach drop as he grabbed an emergency suit. 18 minutes? Can't we just seal the section and evacuate? 47 miners are trapped in the processing facility. Evacuation is impossible until we restore containment fields. She was sealing her own suit with practiced movements, but Marcus caught the tension in her voice. "This will require precision work under extreme conditions." They raced through corridors filled with emergency lighting and the acrid smell of overheated circuits. When they reached Beta Section, Marcus saw the problem immediately. A massive cargo transport had struck the outer hull during docking, tearing a 15-meter gash in the station's skin. Atmosphere was screaming out into space while emergency force fields flickered weakly, buying them precious minutes. "The containment field generators are damaged," Vex observed, scanning the twisted wreckage with her instruments. "We need to reroute power through the backup systems and manually recalibrate the field harmonics." "While the hull is actively decompressing?" "Yes." Marcus looked at the chaos around them. Debris floated in the reduced gravity, sparks showered from damaged conduits, and the emergency fields were clearly failing. It was the kind of situation that required perfect coordination between two people who trusted each other completely. "What do you need me to do?" Vex's expression was grim as she handed him a field generator toolkit. "Access the primary coupling manifold in section Beta 7. I will reroute power from the central hub. We must synchronize our efforts exactly, or the fields will collapse entirely." They separated, moving through the emergency corridors with the clock counting down. Marcus found the manifold buried behind a tangle of twisted metal and damaged conduits. The coupling was barely accessible, requiring him to squeeze into a space barely large enough for his shoulders while working by feel alone. "Field generators are responding," Vex's voice crackled through his comm. "I am reading fluctuations in the harmonic matrix. Can you access the calibration interface?" Marcus stretched his arm deeper into the wreckage, ignoring the sharp edges, scraping his suit. "Almost. Got it. I can reach the manual controls, but I can't see the display." "I will guide you. Turn the primary resonance dial counterclockwise, exactly 2.3 degrees. How can you be that precise when you can't see what I'm doing?" "I am monitoring the field resonance from here. Trust me." Marcus turned the dial, feeling the subtle vibration change through his gloves. Around them, the emergency fields strengthened, slightly, buying them precious seconds. Good. Now the secondary harmonic adjustment, clockwise 1.7 degrees. They worked together like dancers performing a routine they had never practiced but somehow knew by heart. Vex's voice remained calm and precise in his ear, guiding his hands to make adjustments he couldn't see while she manipulated systems he couldn't reach. It was the kind of partnership that required absolute faith in each other's abilities. Field. "Strength is stabilizing," she reported as he made the final adjustment. "Emergency containment is holding at 67% capacity, sufficient for evacuation procedures." Marcus pulled himself out of the wreckage, breathing hard inside his helmet. Through the emergency lighting, he could see Vex at her control station, her silver hair catching the red glow as she monitored the repairs. Even in crisis, she moved with that characteristic grace that made everything look effortless. "Evacuation teams are moving the miners to safety," she announced. "We have prevented a catastrophic loss of life." "We did that," Marcus said, still amazed at what they had accomplished. 47 people are alive because we worked together." Vex looked up from her instruments, and for a moment, her composed mask slipped entirely. Her silver eyes were wide with something that might have been amazement or relief or something else entirely. "Yes," she said quietly. "We did." Later, after the emergency teams had secured the hull breach and the miners had been safely evacuated, Marcus found Vex in her office. She was standing at the viewport again, staring out at the stars with an expression he had never seen before. "You saved those people," he said. "We saved them. Your work was as crucial as mine, but you coordinated everything. You stayed calm, made the right decisions, trusted me to do my part even when you couldn't see what I was doing." She turned to face him, and he was surprised to see something vulnerable in her expression. "I have never worked with someone who complimented my abilities so naturally. Zephyrian training emphasizes individual competence, self-reliance, but tonight, we were more effective together than either of us could have been alone. That's what I was trying to tell you about humans. We're better together." "I am beginning to understand that." Marcus took a step closer. "Vex, can I ask you something?" "Always." "When you're guiding me through those repairs, when we're working together like that, how does it feel?" She was quiet for a long moment, her silver skin shimmering in the starlight. "It feels like finding a part of myself I did not know was missing." The admission hung between them like a confession. Marcus felt his heart racing again, and this time, he didn't care if she could hear it. "I know what you mean," he said softly. I came out here thinking I was looking for adventure, for something different. But what I found was you. Vex's eyes widened slightly. Marcus, I know this is complicated. Different species, boss and employee, all of that. But I can't pretend anymore that this is just about work. She stared at him for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly, she reached out and touched his hand with her long silver fingers. Her skin was warm, warmer than he had expected, and he could feel her pulse through her fingertips. Nor can I, she said quietly. In the soft glow of the starlight, with the crisis behind them and the truth finally spoken between them, Marcus realized that sometimes the most important discoveries happened not in the vastness of space, but in the small, quiet moments when two beings found they were no longer alone. Navigation protocols. The morning shift change brought unwelcome complications in the form of Director Zale Thornwick, Stellar Dynamics Regional Supervisor. Marcus knew something was wrong the moment he saw Vex's expression during the staff briefing. Her usual composed demeanor had returned, but with an added layer of tension that made her seem carved from ice. Efficiency reports indicate irregularities in night shift operations, Thornwick announced to the assembled department heads. He was a heavy-set human with calculating eyes and the kind of smile that never reached beyond his teeth. Extended. Maintenance periods, irregular resource allocation, unauthorized system modifications. Marcus felt his stomach clench. Their late-night conversations, their careful explorations of station systems, their growing partnership, it had all been noticed, documented, analyzed. Furthermore, Thornwick continued, there are concerns about fraternization between management and subordinate personnel. Such relationships compromise professional judgment and create liability issues for the corporation. Vex's silver eyes found Marcus across the briefing room. In that brief glance, he saw apology, regret, and something that might have been goodbye. Effective immediately, Engineer Webb will be transferred to day shift operations under human supervision. Night shift will return to standard operational protocols. After the briefing, Marcus tried to catch Vex alone, but she seemed to evaporate whenever he approached. It wasn't until his third attempt that he cornered her in the auxiliary data processing center. Vex, we need to talk. There is nothing to discuss. You have your new assignment. I suggest you focus on that. Her voice was back to its original formal tone, all traces of warmth carefully erased. But Marcus had learned to read her tells, and he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her ears twitched slightly when she was suppressing emotion. Don't do this. Don't pretend the last month didn't happen. The last month was a professional relationship that became inappropriately personal. Director Thornwick is correct to address the situation. Inappropriately personal? Is that what you call saving 47 lives together? For the first time, her composure cracked slightly. That was work. Emergency response. Nothing more. Really? Because I remember you saying it felt like finding a missing part of yourself. Vex's silver skin flushed, but she turned away before he could read her expression fully. I spoke carelessly. The situation was stressful. Marcus moved around to face her. Look me in the eyes and tell me this doesn't matter to you. Tell me I imagined everything between us. She did look at him then, and he saw the truth in her liquid silver gaze before she could hide it behind professional distance. What I feel is irrelevant. I have responsibilities. To who? Thornwick, the corporation, or to yourself? To the station. To the people who depend on its operation. And what about what you depend on? When was the last time you did something just because it made you happy? Happiness is a luxury I cannot afford. Yeah, you said that before. But who decided that? Who made that rule? Vex was quiet for a long moment, her hands clasped behind her back in a pose that was either formal restraint or holding herself together. You do not understand the pressures I face. My position, my species' expectations, the corporate hierarchy. There are complexities you cannot comprehend. Then explain them to me. I cannot or will not. She looked at him with an expression that was equal parts frustration and longing. Marcus, please. This is difficult enough without you questioning every decision. I'm not questioning your decisions. I'm questioning whether they're really yours to make. The words hit harder than he had intended. Vex actually took a step backward, her composed mask slipping to reveal something raw underneath. Of course, they are my decisions. Are they? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Thornwick snapped his fingers and you immediately fell in line. Where's the woman who told me she valued competence and order? Where's the person who trusted me enough to guide me through emergency repairs when lives were on the line? That person was being impractical. That person was being real. They stared at each other across the small space, the hum of data processors filling the silence between them. Marcus could see her internal struggle playing out in the tension of her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands she couldn't quite hide. You want to know the truth? She said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I have spent 6 years building my reputation, proving that a Zephyrian can lead a multi-species operation effectively. One mistake, one appearance of impropriety, and everything I have worked for disappears. Caring about someone isn't impropriety. In corporate culture, it is a weakness to be exploited. Marcus felt his frustration boiling over. So what's your plan? Pretend nothing happened. Go back to being alone in your office, working 20-hour days and having conversations with computer terminals? If necessary. That's not living, Vex. That's just surviving. Survival is sufficient. No, it's not. Not when you've experienced something better. She looked at him with eyes that were bright with unshed tears, something he had never seen from her before. And what would you have me do? Abandon my responsibilities? Destroy my career for the possibility of happiness with someone I have known for 4 weeks? I'd have you choose what you want instead of what you think you should want. And if I choose incorrectly, then we figure it out together. The word together seemed to resonate in the small space between them. Vex's formal posture wavered, and for a moment Marcus thought she might reach for him. Instead, she straightened her uniform and moved toward the door. Your day shift begins in 6 hours. I suggest you prepare for the transition. Vex, this conversation is over, Engineer Webb. But as she walked away, Marcus caught the slight hesitation in her step, the way her hand lingered on the doorframe before she left. Maybe the conversation was over, but the decision wasn't final. Not yet. Standing alone in the data processing center, surrounded by the soft hum of machinery and the distant sound of her footsteps echoing down the corridor, Marcus realized that sometimes the hardest part of reaching for something you wanted wasn't the fear of failure. It was convincing the other person they deserved to be happy too. Course correction. 3 days into his day shift assignment, Marcus was ready to reprogram himself into a maintenance drone. His new supervisor, Chief Engineer Hendricks, treated every minor repair like a military operation and seemed to believe that efficiency could be achieved through excessive documentation and repeated safety briefings. Webb, I need a 14-page report on the atmospheric processor tune-up, Hendricks announced during their morning briefing. Include detailed analysis of each component, projected maintenance schedules, and risk assessment matrices. For changing, a filter? For maintaining professional standards. Marcus glanced around the day shift briefing room, noting the tired expressions on his colleagues' faces. This was what Vex had been trying to protect him from. The soul-crushing bureaucracy that valued procedure over results. That evening, unable to sleep during what had been his working hours for the past month, Marcus made his way to the observation deck. The station rotated slowly, bringing Saturn's rings into view through the massive transparent aluminum windows. He wasn't surprised to find he wasn't alone. Vex stood at the far end of the deck, silhouetted against the cosmic vista. She looked smaller somehow, less commanding than she had in the maintenance corridors. More alone. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, approaching slowly. She didn't turn around. "Zephyrians do not sleep in the traditional sense." "Right. Meditative states. How's that working out for you?" "Meditation requires mental calm. Current circumstances make that challenging." Marcus joined her at the observation window. Below them, the gas giant's storms swirled in patterns that had been unchanged for millennia. "I heard about the mining. Quotas. Thornwick has implemented new efficiency protocols. Production is down 12%, because the day crew doesn't know the systems like we did. Like you did. My knowledge remains unchanged." Marcus studied her profile in the starlight. The silver tones in her skin seemed muted, less luminous than he remembered. "When was the last time you laughed?" "I do not laugh frequently." "But you did. With me. That night when I told you about getting lost in my own apartment." A slight smile touched her lips before she caught herself. "That was an anomaly. The best things usually are." They stood in silence, watching Saturn's slow dance. Finally, Vex spoke. "Thornwick has scheduled a performance review for next week. He has concerns about my leadership effectiveness. Because production is down, because I deviated from established protocols, because I allowed personal considerations to influence professional decisions." Marcus felt anger flare in his chest. "You mean because you saved 47 lives by trusting your team instead of following some manual? That is not how it will be recorded in my file." "Then maybe it's time to stop caring what goes in your file." She turned to look at him then, her silver eyes wide with something that might have been shock. "That is not how corporate hierarchies function. No, it's how life functions. Sometimes you have to choose between what's safe and what's right, between what's expected and what's real. And if I choose incorrectly? If I lose everything I have worked for?" Marcus took a step closer. "What if you're missing everything worth working for?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Vex stared at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Part longing, part terror, part hope. "Marcus, The deck shuddered beneath their feet as emergency klaxons wailed. Red lights bathed the observation deck as automated systems announced a new crisis. "Hull breach in Section Gamma," Vex said, already moving toward the emergency stations. "Cascade failure in the primary power grid." Marcus was right behind her. "How bad?" "Catastrophic if not contained within 30 minutes. They raced through corridors filling with emergency personnel. When they reached the command center, Marcus saw Director Thornwick barking orders at confused technicians, while systems failures cascaded across multiple displays. "The automated systems are not responding," one technician reported. "We need manual intervention, but the affected areas are too dangerous for standard crews. Then we evacuate the section and contain the breach," Thornwick decided. "Sir, there are over 200 personnel in Gamma Section," another technician protested. "Evacuation will take at least 45 minutes. Then we minimize losses." Marcus felt his stomach drop. They were talking about abandoning people to save the station. He looked at Vex, who was studying the emergency displays with intense concentration. "There is another option," she said quietly. Thornwick turned to her. "I'm listening." "Manual power rerouting through the auxiliary systems, synchronized field adjustments to contain the breach while maintaining life support. It would require precise coordination between two technicians." "How precise?" "Within milliseconds. Any error would result in complete system failure." Thornwick frowned. "Too risky. We stick with evacuation." "Sir," Marcus stepped forward. "Supervisor Calandros and I have successfully executed similar emergency repairs. We can do this." "You're not qualified for this level of..." We saved 47 lives 3 weeks ago using exactly this kind of coordination. Marcus interrupted. We can save 200 now. Vex looked at him with surprise, then at Thornwick with something that might have been defiance. He is correct. We have demonstrated the capability. Absolutely not. I will not risk my best supervisor on an untested procedure with an unqualified technician. Then you condemn 200 people to death, Vex said flatly. The command center went silent except for the emergency alarms. Marcus saw something shift in Vex's expression. A decision being made. In real time. Director Thornwick, she said, her voice carrying new authority. I am exercising emergency command protocols. Engineer Webb and I will execute manual containment procedures immediately. I forbid it. Your forbiddance is noted and overruled. Marcus felt his heart race as Vex turned to him. Are you ready, Engineer Webb? Ready when you are, Supervisor. Calandros. They moved through the emergency corridors like they had never been apart, falling back into the rhythm they had discovered during their night shifts. Vex guided him through power rerouting procedures while she managed field harmonics. Their voices calm in each other's comms as they worked against the clock. Field resonance is stabilizing, she reported, as Marcus made final adjustments to systems he couldn't see. Life support is holding in all sections. Power grid is responding. Emergency containment is active. 28 minutes after the crisis began, they had saved not just the 200 people in Gamma Section, but the entire station. When they emerged from the emergency areas, they found the command center filled with relieved personnel and one very angry director. Your actions were insubordinate and reckless, Thornwick began. Our actions saved lives, Vex replied calmly, which I believe is our primary responsibility. Your primary responsibility is following orders. No, she said, and Marcus heard something new in her voice. Certainty. My primary responsibility is to the people on this station. To doing what is right, not what is convenient. She turned to Marcus, and he saw the woman he had fallen for looking back at him. Confident, decisive, unafraid. Engineer Webb, would you like to return to night shift maintenance? I thought you'd never ask. As they walked away from Thornwick's sputtering protests, Marcus felt Vex's hand brush against his. Not quite holding hands, not yet, but a promise of possibility. So, he said as they headed toward the maintenance decks. Ready to be inappropriately personal again. This time, her laugh was bright and free, echoing through the corridors like music. I believe I can risk being happy, Engineer Webb. Just, Marcus is fine. Just Marcus, she agreed, and in her voice he heard the sound of someone choosing their own course at last. Together they walked into their future, whatever complications it might bring.